Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Linux user group. The first one for the month of October this year is just flying right on by. So for those of you who are watching live, welcome. My watch is listening to me. If you want to join, you can hit up the Discord server. I don't have a link in the description this time, but you can find them on any of my videos or on the channel itself. And the link for the lug will be on the Discord server there. So if you want to join or if you just want to watch along, you can do that as well. So this time we have a topic, and that topic is Linux deal breakers, things that would make you run back to Windows. So I'm gonna guess, and this is just guess that there's not gonna be these are gonna be either super deal breakers or you won't have any. So Steve, why don't you take us off, bud?
All right, I want to kick us off with there's one thing that would get me off of Linux. It's when they stop caring about privacy. That's it. Only one thing.
Say that again. I'm sorry. I missed that one. Okay,
When they stop caring about privacy. So
oh, okay.
when the vulnerabilities hit an all-time high, that's on the only time I'm gonna leave Linux. Otherwise, ain't nothing gonna move me away from Linux.
I can see that. I don't. The question I have for you is: do you really think that they care about privacy? I mean, security, yes.
I meant
Privacy?
security and privacy.
Okay.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. So I guess I'll go next. Probably the thing that would drive one of the things that would drive me back if I guess if we all had to use the same distro. I mean, I know that's never going to happen, but we can kind of get into the realm of, what if things, I guess. If we all had to use Ubuntu or something like that, I probably wouldn't be here. If we all had to use something like, I don't know, Solus or something like that, I probably wouldn't be here. Or Elementary OS, something like that. The thing that I like most about Linux is the choice, the ability for me to choose what I want. Or if we all had to use GNOME, I would definitely go back to. I'd probably go to Mac OS or something. I mean, if I'm gonna be limited on choice, I might as well be limited on choice and also have really good hardware. So, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what you said. Yeah, that you made me rethink this. If we had no more choices but to stick to one, but if the only choice was Arch and KDE, I'd stick to Linux.
So if the only choices were the things that you would choose, I suppose I'd be the same way. If OpenSUSE was around, I'd be fine. Riggs, go ahead.
Similar to what you've just said, really, but like if less everybody using one distro because distros don't really matter. Like under the hood, it's all the same. Distros just what package manager you're using and the defaults. But if like the stuff that you choose in that was also like if everybody had the same desktop environment, that's when I'd start looking because even if it was stuff that I would otherwise be choosing to use, because then you're not going to have the ability to just get bored and change up absolutely everything like next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got to be able to tinker around with stuff. Got to be able to choose like every tiny little bit for me.
Yeah, if you couldn't tinker, Linux wouldn't be any fun. Now, in the video I posted yesterday, I got a lot of shit for uh, me talking the way that I did, and one of the things people kept saying, "Well, Linux for you is like a hobby or whatever." So tinkering does make Linux a hobby, but I think that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a hobby that's also productive. Nick, go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, basically I agree with what you guys have said so far, but I mean, I already do go back to Windows to play certain games. So I guess if software vendors stop supporting Linux or Wine couldn't work properly, that would be a big deal breaker for me. If software people stop making software for Linux, then that would be bad too.
Or if Valve decided to stop doing Proton, like they cut a deal with Windows, or
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Microsoft bought Valve. I mean, they have enough money, they could do that, and they bought all the other game developers, so it wouldn't be all that far off, the realm of possibility. And then why would they want to maintain the Linux support? So that'd be a big thing, right? Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, another thing that would get me off of Linux is hardware support. If the only place to get drivers, for example, would be to try to compile them ourselves and making us have to do the hard work. Now, although I am a tinkerer, as was proven by Zero Linux, doing that, having less hardware support would get me off of Linux. But to be honest with you guys, there's nothing, no matter how difficult Linux becomes, and less compatible it becomes with hardware, I would still be on Linux because of what Microsoft is doing with Windows. Like now, Chris Tech made a video recently about what's it called, Recall, being a dependency of File Explorer. So nobody can get rid of it. It's mandatory now. So no matter how difficult or hard Linux becomes, I think I would stick to it and find workarounds. But if we didn't have any workarounds, then I'll go to macOS, but not to Windows. Windows is out of my life for good. The only other choice I have, I would think, is macOS, because it still does things relatively well while limiting, no matter how limiting it might be, but it's still doing it well enough to be usable. But Windows, unusable, no matter what.
Don?
Yeah, for me, Windows is off the board. I'll never use Windows again. If I had to leave Linux for some reason, I'd probably go to one of the BSDs, FreeBSD or one of those. I got a lot of freedom with that. Yeah, I might have to do some more work to make it work, but I can make it work if I have to. However, I don't see Linux becoming so bad that I can't find some distribution somewhere that I can use. I'm on Void right now and I'm enjoying it.
I think obviously most of the stuff we're going to be talking about today is going to be hypothetical, but there are some things that could happen that would that would hurt us all into different distros, right? So, if for whatever reason Debian decided to start doing some shenanigans of some kind, a lot of stuff is based on Debian, so it'd be fractious for a while, like because we'd have a lot of forks. Like for example, when Audacity was purchased, right? It was open source, everybody loved it for a long time, was purchased by a company, and everybody freaked out. Now it ended up not having much of a fallout because the forks just kind of fizzled out and nobody cared. But if something like that, happened with like one of the major distributions, it was bought by someone the Linux community didn't care for, that could lead towards people. But because there's so much choices, it does make it easy for us to transition into something different. Riggs, go ahead.
A few things. First, I just found it hilarious that Steve's answer for what would get you to stop using Linux was hardware. So basically, like, if he literally couldn't boot it anymore, that's what it'd take. But yeah, I think it'd be hard for Linux to get to a point where any of this was an issue because different distros exist. Like, it would need to be either something in the kernel, or there would be a distro that you could just jump to. But like, if it did happen, like somehow it did happen, I would probably have to go BSD over likes of Mac just because it'd feel too restrictive otherwise. I'd have to check out the BSD stuff.
One of these days I'll actually end up checking BSD out. People keep asking me. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the kernel part that Riggs mentioned. The kernel does have some proprietary code in it, but if it became completely proprietary and closed, might as well go to FreeBSD or Mac. I've used FreeBSD for a total of 35 minutes. And it's not because I didn't like it that I didn't stick to it, is because I had to do too much to get it to work, and coming from a distro maintainer who's using Arch, it's kind of weird. But Arch, there's if you look at a lot of people, they find themselves better on Arch than on any other distro, including Nix. It's a toss-up between Nix, Gentoo, and Arch, but still, on FreeBSD, there's a lot of incompatibilities, and they're way, 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 way behind. That's why I would choose Mac, because it's compatible with almost everything except gaming, and I don't game much, so I don't give a rat's potato if I don't get the game, as long as I can still write code or do stuff like that. I'm okay with Mac OS. But yeah, everything we're mentioning here or gonna mention, it will be hypothetical, because Linux, let's be realistic, Linux ain't going nowhere, and the choice for that matter is not going anywhere. So yeah.
Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, the deal breaker would be Microsoft Office, because my work requires the use of Microsoft Excel, so I can't do away with, and LibreOffice is nowhere near Microsoft Office. Uh, and before using Linux, I had been using it for 5 6 years, so I just can't replace it right now, and some bunch of the softwares.
Yeah. So for me personally, one of the things we should talk about later on, I'll let Nick go ahead here in a second, but we should talk about things that could draw us back to Windows, like if Microsoft decided to make it Linux or something. Nick, go ahead.
I think the reason I don't use FreeBSD at all in my home lab stuff is because it doesn't have Docker support, and that's it. That's the only reason. So if Linux didn't have Docker support, I probably wouldn't be using it, because I run a lot of server stuff like Proxmox, TrueNAS. Well, actually, I'd still be running TrueNAS, but I don't know. Yeah, Docker support. That's my thing. Has to have it.
Yeah, Docker's a big deal. No, if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I wouldn't have cared. But now, yeah, if Docker went away, granted, I mean, I don't know what the container. I mean, can you run Docker on Windows? I don't even know. Probably. Riggs, go ahead.
Just from what you said about looking at it the other way, like what could Windows do to change things? First of all, you don't need an account anymore. That's requirement one. And then after that, just like I used to think that installing software from a command line was stupid until I actually started doing it, and it's so much better. Like just like if Windows they need a package manager, they need something like that, some way of getting software. Like, I mean, I'm trying to find a way of saying it that isn't just make Windows Linux, basically, because like at this point that's realistically the answer. But yeah, get rid of the Microsoft account and some form of package manager for installing software. That'd be my main two, and maybe even before I even started considering it, they'd have to be the first two.
Steve?
Yeah, I was going to say, number one, Docker, yes, and something that's going to put a smile on your face. Well, whenever the bombs are not falling, I'm working on a new home lab, and I'm going to be using a lot of what you are using, and this time the Raspberry Pi will be my home lab, because the Proxmox, I don't need it. I prefer using QEMU Work Manager on my main PC. It's better, quicker access. But other than that, I wanted to add to what Riggs said again. Microsoft already has a way to install packages via terminal, but I do agree with the part where he said get rid of the Microsoft account. And I don't know who it was who said Microsoft Office. There is Microsoft Office Web. Maybe that could be a solution on Linux. There's a web app for that. I can't think of anything else.
I think I don't think that there's anything. I think that you guys are right, that the only thing that Linux or Microsoft could do to make Windows usable would be to make it Linux, but they'd fuck it up so bad that it wouldn't be recognizable as Linux. And I mean, it would be forced reboots, because of course it would, right? It would be, because they're going to want to be able to push all of their updates, even if it's based on a different kernel. So that's going to be the same thing, and that pisses me off now. Why wouldn't it piss me off then? It would have, it'd be harder to. I was gonna say it was gonna be harder to download software, but that might not be true because they might actually do a better job. They might actually make app image usable. Like they could take something like app image and make it into their format instead of exe, so you could just click on it and it would install, kind of thing. That'd be cool. Although what they'd do without wizards, I don't know. So it's an interesting question, but I have such little faith in Microsoft to do it in a way that would be good that I don't. Steve, go ahead.
I knew you were going to mention app images, and technically on Windows there are such things like app images, quote unquote. They're called portable apps, self-contained portable apps, but it's not Microsoft that makes them, it's developers who make them. Most of them, 99% of them, done by users like you and I, but others done by the developers of the app itself. Like, I'm going to give an example from the top of my head. Free Download Manager. Free Download Manager is a download manager for people with slow internet. There is an option within the app to create a portable version. So this is, to me, represents app images, but they are exes and they are still vulnerable to hacks and malicious code and whatnot, unlike app images. But still, the idea is there. They're slowly giving us a little bit of freedom, like the freedom to install applications using Winget or Winget GUI. So if you want the terminal, it's Winget. If you want the GUI part, you can use the GUI part without bypassing the Windows Store completely. And you do not need a Microsoft account to install these apps either. But still, they're way too slow to have Microsoft Windows in the running in case something happens to Linux. The only alternative OS, in my eyes, in case for whatever reason something happens to Linux, is Mac OS or FreeBSD. Those are the only two.
Riggs, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
It's a good job I accidentally stayed muted, because as soon as I started, I realised I'd forgot what I said. Made myself sound a bit silly. Oh, that was it. Yeah. No, it's gone again. No, I forgot.
I do that all
It
the
was
time.
something to do. It was something to do with what you said before Steve went. No, I've lost it. I've lost it.
If you remember, raise your hand again. Nick, go ahead.
Microsoft technically has a Linux distro, Azure Linux, but it's only meant for their cloud infrastructure stuff, because they don't want it to encroach on desktop stuff at all. So it's never going to happen for desktop, but they technically do have a distro.
I thought, don't they have two? They have one called like Sphere or something that's for IoT stuff.
Yeah, possibly too.
Yeah. So they do. They're much more Linux, friendly than they used to be. The real question, I mean, we've somehow turned this into a Microsoft lug, but that's okay, I guess. The real question is, I mean, the NT kernel is getting old in the tooth, to say the least. I mean, it came out in what? It's probably getting close to 30 years old. And it, I mean, eventually it's going to have so much legacy craft on it, it's going to fall over if it hasn't already. So it seems like they'd have some sort of plan to go to something different, but I don't know if that's going to be Linux or not. Excuse me. So let's, Riggs, go ahead.
You just reminded me with that. Because you were saying earlier, if Microsoft was to go more Linux, and I was going to mention, like, even if they swapped out the kernel and it had the Linux kernel and was technically Linux, it would still be like Microsoft's way of doing things, which are the problems. Like the fundamental issue wouldn't be like the kernel, because even if you put the Linux kernel in there, none of us would switch, like, because it's the whole way of doing things on Windows that's like everything would have to, so much would have to change that, like, I know all these conversations are hypothetical, but like there's so many levels of like what would have to go wrong, and for most of them, the answer would just be switching to a different distro rather than leaving Linux entirely.
Well, okay, so this might be an absurd statement for me to make, but I think that's much more likely for Linux to ruin itself than Microsoft to fix itself, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because if you think, let's posit the Doomsday scenario. Red Hat is owned by IBM. IBM is a company that has shareholders that needs to make money. And in that situation, as we talked about in the last slug, they have a fiduciary responsibility to make money, right? So let's just say, because Red Hat has their pies in so many fingers and controls so many projects that are necessary for Linux to survive, things like systemd, Wayland, GNOME, you name it, Pipewire, tons of stuff, all of it mainly developed by Red Hat developers. If, for example, they decided to say either A, they're going to take all those projects in-house and all of them are going to be behind a paywall, similar to what they did with RHEL, or they just say that, sorry, we can no longer provide Red Hat developers to work on these projects anymore, so they'll have to either be split out into the community or just be left to languish in, unmaintained mode. If that happened, that could seriously put a hamper on Linux, because every distro uses those technologies to be a distro. Now, there are obviously alternatives, so things like different init systems exist. We could all fall back to ALSA if we had to. God, that just sounds horrible. But, it's possible. Linux would survive, but it'd be a rough few years until alternative things could be taken up or forks could be developed and actually maintained, things like that. It would be rough for a little while. So that feels much more likely to me than Microsoft saying, we've been doing it wrong all these years. We're just going to adopt the open source lifestyle. It doesn't... One feels much more likely than the other, even if the realm of possibility on both is pretty low. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. You're absolutely right that if Red Hat decided to take everything in house, but only this time, since Linux has come such a long way, it's not going to be as hard as building everything from scratch. They already have what they have, but it's going to take Linux a few steps backwards. So it's going to end up being a catch-up game, but it's not going to kill Linux at all. Just that we're going to be playing catch-up, just like Ubuntu and Debian are doing for compared to rolling releases. They always are playing catch-up, but everyone is going at their own pace. But still, that will it will do like what happens in some countries, like they go 50 steps forwards, then something happens politically or whatever, economically or whatever, it ends up taking them 1,000 steps backwards. Same thing will happen with Linux, but it's never gonna die. Linux, realistically, it ain't going nowhere, and a lot of projects like if you look at Mac OS, for example, they're mimicking a lot of Linux stuff. Android, Apple is mimicking a lot of Android features, and so others are mimicking some other proprietary stuff are mimicking Linux, but they're making them proprietary and behind a license and whatever. But what it shows me is that Linux is doing something right for people to be picking and choosing stuff from it.
Riggs, go ahead.
Just carrying on this situation where like Red Hat pulls everything. I'm not too knowledgeable on like the specifics of licenses, so I'm just trying to clarify. Really, like, if that situation happened, we would have everything as it is now, right? We would, because that was already open source before they pulled it, so we would still have we'd effectively be forking from now rather than having to. Yeah, right. Okay. I just wanted to clarify because I'm not sure on. I'm fairly new to all of this anyway in general, but licenses, I do not know the difference between the different open source licenses. I do find it funny, though, I was struggling to come up with ideas. That says great things, I think, that like it's this hard for us to think of ideas.
We're all Linux fans, so it's really hard for us to imagine situations where. Then I think in general, none of us are, super Windows users. So finding a situation where we're gonna hightail it back to Windows because Linux effed everything up. And I mean, also as we've mentioned several times, Linux is somewhat disaster proof in that if say OpenSUSE decided that it wasn't going to exist anymore, they chose a stupid name because OpenSUSE or SUSE didn't want them to be called OpenSUSE anymore. That's it's a real possibility that they choose a stupid name and I can't use it because their name sucks. I've talked about that before. If that happens, there are other distros that I could go to. I love Debian. I'd be perfectly happy on Debian. I think if I had to rank my distros, OpenSUSE is number one, Debian's number two. I could easily go there, live, and be happy, forever, as long as Debian's around and still doing the Debian way of doing things. So, because there are other alternatives, it makes it much easier to. Or it makes it much harder to imagine a situation where we had to go back to Windows because we have other options. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying. Linux is not going to go anywhere. But I like when I think Steve was saying that. What happens when Linus dies, and who's doing all the merging of the pull requests then? And will we end up with a situation where we just get a bunch of different forks of the Linux kernel, each doing their own thing? I don't know. It's a question to everybody, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think that when Linus retires or dies, there will be people to take over. The real question isn't that will there be someone to take over, because there are obviously many more Linux kernel developers than just him. And really, he's just kind of like the overseer. So somebody else could step in that position. But the real question is, he has such a personality that kind of, I mean, it feels like he rules it with an iron fist, right? Like he's involved with everything. He seems to have the final say on most things. Although I'm sure that there's more. I'm sure he does delegate more now than he did, like back in the '90s or whatever. But it just feels like he's there. Like he's this overarching presence that if something were to go wrong, daddy's home and he can take care of it, right? If he goes away, what what happens? And that is a good question. Steve, go ahead.
First off, you traitor. You'd go Debian, you don't go Arch. Just kidding. But on the subject of Linus, he already chose his successor, and his successor, I don't know his name, but his successor thinks so much like him. I'm not too worried that things will change too much in case he retires or whatever. I'm not too scared for the kernel. The only thing that scares me from the kernel is these days there's a lot of money going into it with proprietary code like Intel and some other stuff, and the recent kerfuffle and argument about bcachefs. After watching Brody's video, I was like, dude, get rid of it and let that guy knock his head against the wall and let's be done with it. Stop with this drama. But that's what makes Linus who he is. It's all the drama. But I'm not too scared for the kernel, anything happening to the kernel.
The kernel is, I want to, you can't say
I
something.
think you're muted, Matt.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Matt doesn't know how to do anything. Anyways, I think the kernel, I don't want to say it is bulletproof because, it obviously could take it a long term, but I think that in a lot of ways it's self-correcting. and it has existed long enough that it is not necessarily immune, but resistant to major outside influence. And when I say major, what I mean isn't that there's not outside influence. There's a lot of that, but it's more that, you know, because it's so big and it infuses so many different places, it's much more democratic in that everyone has their own little things that need to happen, so they kind of have to work together in order to do it. The question is like, are we going to have situations where like Amazon decides that they can't work with the main Linux line anymore, they have to fork it and do their own thing, right? And then eventually, you know, Microsoft does the same thing and Google does the same thing, and all of a sudden we have a whole bunch of corporations using their own Linux kernel based on, you know, a previous Linux kernel, and they no longer have to contribute to the main line anymore. Because I mean, whether we like it or not, a lot of the kernel contributions come from major corporations: Intel, Google, Microsoft, Amazon. They use it, so they contribute back to it. That's part of the whole licensing scheme, right? And that's good. At least I think that it's good, even though some people, anti-corporatists, would say that's not to get into the previous discussion last time, but the because they have resources to actually pay maintainers, you know, to do things. I think that it allows for faster development on a lot of stuff that needs to be developed on, like hardware support, like being able to support the most recent, you know, NVIDIA card, or the most recent AMD card, or the most recent CPU. That stuff wouldn't happen as fast as it does without cooperation from Intel, from NVIDIA, from AMD, you know. So I think that's thing there, and because they all have to kind of contribute, you know, together in order to maintain this thing, I think that makes the Linux kernel more stable in terms of not being able to be gone away. But the question is, how much does Linus play in that situation being the way that it is? Like, if he goes away, does corporate influence become much more toxic than it is now? Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I almost dropped my iPad. But yeah, I'm coming to you from my iPad. Duh. Yeah, what you said is 100% true. If he didn't have a successor, or his successor decided, hey, I don't want to do all the work, I'll leave it to corporate entities to do whatever they want, I'll just make sure everything works. Yeah, that's scary. That's a scary thought, because that's what's happening with Windows. They will decide what goes, and by things becoming no longer becoming being open source, then they got us by the throat. Basically, we wouldn't have the advancement that we have today. It's the open nature of Linux that makes it advance at such a rapid rate, because everybody's contributing, everybody is pointing out issues. Once the kernel becomes completely proprietary, it'll become slow, and it's going to become like Windows, where we report an issue, 20 years later it's fixed. That's what scares me.
Yeah, it's going to be very. I mean, because Linus isn't a young guy, so I mean, eventually he's going to want to retire. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up going. And I think it's one of the reasons why it's so important to inspire the youth of the world to become developers, to learn how learn how Linux works, how computers work, because they're going to be the ones that eventually take over for us old guys to do things, and they have to be interested in that. They can't just be iPhone users, you know. So yeah, Steve, go ahead.
No, my friend. It's going to be AI. Everything will be done by AI. Humans, like elongated Tusk, as I call him, says, we don't need no developer. We don't need no stinking developers. AI will develop. AI will do. AI will make your lives better. So that's something else to be scared about, because okay, Linux AI can be good, but if it gets into the hands of corporations, you can bet your sweet ass that it's going to go the way of the dodo, because they're going to shove as much AI into Linux as humanly possible, inhumanly possible. So, yeah, no, please, Linux, don't die. I love you.
Riggs, go ahead.
I can't wait for this AI stuff to die. Rather than what you call him, Steve, I just call him a word and get Matt demonetized. Like this whole thing with like coding AI stuff, it's just so infuriating. Like you still need actual coders to be able to even just proofread it, because turns out AI is actually not very intelligent. But yeah, I hope they don't bring that stuff here. Like we no, just don't bring it in.
So, I mean, okay, AI is going to come to Linux in some form or fashion. I mean, most of it's developed on Linux. I think that eventually there will be a distro out there that incorporates it more than it probably does already. I'm sure like Deepin or something like that will be the first or something. But there's going to be like an AI distro that's going to have. There are already AI applications that you can download, things like Whisper. There's one that I covered in a video not too long ago that was like a front end for that. So AI is going to be part of the open source conversation. The question, if we're going to get into the AI stuff, is how does that happen, right? Because from what I understand, I'm not a developer at all, and I'm not smart enough to figure out how AI works. But from what I've read and from what I've listened to in podcasts and such, is that AI would be nearly impossible to open source unless it started off that way, right? Like, so if someone created AI from the start and open sourced it, it would still be okay. But even then, because it relies on such large data sets, and a lot of that stuff is not open source, and open source companies don't collect that stuff, they have to get that from other people. It's very hard for the collective of an AI thing to be open sourced. And obviously that's a big problem. So it's going to be because AI is going to come to Linux at some point in a major way. The question just becomes how. Steve, go ahead.
To answer the how question, we got the likes of Olama, created by Facebook. But yeah, none of the AIs, no matter how much they pretend to be open source, they're not 100% open source. Most of them are source available, but not open source completely, because, as you said, the data set is so large. It would require a whole company of developers to handle this data, multiple people handling the data, and no, it's impossible. But as you said, AI is coming to Linux, wanted or not. But when it comes to Linux, it's going to come in such a way where they're gonna open source the front end, at least, not the back end, the front end, to see. This is what we've seen from some of them. I forgot their names, but some of them give you access to the front end source code. You know where your data is going, what servers it's accessing, what data it's collecting to send, and they allow you to opt out of data collection and stuff like that. But as to the data it's spitting out to you when you ask it things, no one has access to that. Like Olama is limited to 2023, same like ChatGPT and other stuff. And I just found out from my brother that we can, although ChatGPT doesn't have access to the internet per se, but we can ask it to connect to the internet. I don't know what the query would be, but it's better for AI not to be connected to the internet. That's my thing about AI, because it's dangerous. But other than that, AI is the future. We cannot change that fact. But when it comes to Linux, it's going to be, in my opinion, from what I'm seeing, from from the AI models that I'm seeing, open source ones, they're not too shabby. They're not too shabby. Nothing to be scared about. It's the data set they have access to that you should proofread, because recently ChatGPT, Zero Linux Toolkit uses a lot of AI to find syntaxes, using some syntaxes, and GPT in what's called Cursor, to be able to fix syntaxes and stuff. Although it fixes syntaxes, I gave it to Perplexity, and Perplexity found errors in ChatGPT and GPT's code. So none of them are perfect, nor will they ever be, because we as humans aren't perfect either. So it's going to be an inherent thing that will never be fixed. It's if people think that there will be a perfect AI at some point, they're just dreaming.
So my opinion on AI is that it's only useful for certain things. Like, it's never. I think that from a commercial standpoint, it may be useful for some things. I think for deep learning things like finding strands of DNA, so like a lot of fields in like medicine and stuff like that have maintained and found some really cool things using AI and stuff. But when it's doing things that humans can't do in a million years, you have to put a lot of trust in that to be accurate. And that worries me quite a bit, but I don't know enough about it to say one way or the other. From a more personal standpoint, things like finding little snippets of code, asking where you went wrong when you're writing a bash script, those things are cool and somewhat useful. But having it replace everyone's job's going to be, and that's just not going to happen for a long time. So, yeah, I don't know. In terms of just bring it back to the Linux conversation, distros themselves probably won't have much to do with AI, to be honest with you. No, maybe one or two will decide to put a tool in there or something like that, but it's really going to be all app based. So, for example, Mozilla is going to put some AI in Firefox. Obviously, Google Chrome is going to have some AI stuff built in. And the forks of Firefox will have to decide whether or not that AI comes along for the ride. So it'll be interesting to see how that stuff plays into the applications that we use. The one thing that we know for sure is that GIMP won't get AI for 100 years. Steve, go ahead.
I don't know why it's you and I who are doing all the talking today, but but no. To bring it back to Linux, you're right. There will be no distro that's 100% running on AI. That's impossible. But yeah, more and more applications these days are including even Circs. The search engine that you're self-hosting is working on AI integration. But the Linux is something that is so user friendly. No matter what distro you are using, there's always a distro for each person. I find it hard that we will reach a point where we need to move away from Linux. But sometimes I hit servers that are so entrenched in Windows. When you say the word Linux, they bash on you like there's no tomorrow. They think that Windows is the best thing behind sliced bread. But yeah, this topic is so weird. It could have been done. It could have been done in 15 minutes. We're trying our best to find
once you
things
stop
to
there,
say.
Steve, we're going to transition over to a new topic. And see how fast he did it. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the because that topic was a little bit of a dud. But the good news is it won't be on the poll anymore. So, by the way, I put a poll out for those of you guys who are not here to that will select the topics. So I just put the topics out there. People vote on them. So don't. I just work here. All right, in other words. So let's go ahead and just transition over to the one that came in second place. Who here owns their own media or hosts their own media? Nick, go ahead. I'm going to skip you, Steve, for just a second.
Yeah, I host all my own media on a TrueNAS box, ZFS, and serve it all up Jellyfin, have it transcoded with an NVIDIA card if I need it. It's about, I don't know, 7, 8 terabytes. It's not obtained through any monetary transaction, though. I'll leave it at that.
You have more than I do. Steve, go ahead.
Well, good choice for the next topic. Really good one. I own all my media because I cannot stream. I live in a country that I'm not going to bring back the topic that I don't want to bring up because of reasons. We don't have a solid enough internet to be able to stream any of the media. That's why I own all of it. And 8 terabytes, baby, you're a baby. 108 terabytes of media and music mostly. And thank the Lord for Docker containers. And Matt, I think you agree with that. I use Cole for my music. Cole is amazing. You just need to do your ID3 tags correctly. But other than that, I use Plex. I've been a Plex, and what I love about Plex is, especially now, my father's watching Chinese, Korean TV shows. The full control over the subtitles. You can add a black background, make them large, make them small. This amazing control over subtitles makes Plex amazing. And owning one's media is way better than relying on corporations to control it, because one day your favorite media is there, the next it's gone. But when you own it, it's always there for you.
Riggs, go ahead.
So I currently don't, but I really want to. And I want to go into the whole home lab stuff. The problem is that I know that if I go into it, I'm going to want to go all out on it. So I'm going to want to have actually have servers in my house kind of thing, rather than go with any kind of cloud solution for it. So I'm kind of waiting until I've got the budget set up to do all of that, and I'm just going to go all out on it and get everything set up. At the minute, the only thing I've got sort of on is I stripped the DRM off some ebooks, or try and find DRM free sites and have them there. But apart from that, I currently don't. But there's definitely plans there for it. As soon as I can set up all of that stuff.
So, for me, I've kind of reverted a little bit. So I host everything. I've talked about it a lot in terms of the home lab stuff, and I like it a lot. But my music collection is such a mess and gained from over the course of 30 years of digital hoarding of different places. Some things from iTunes and legit stuff. Some things from LimeWire back in the early 2000s, back when I was in college. I still have a lot of that stuff. And the audio quality is just so all over the place. It makes it really hard to listen to. So something will be really, really high quality. You can actually hear it. Some of it sounds like it was recorded by holding like a old tape recorder up to a speaker and then digitized. So it hasn't been good. So Drew got me to try Tidal, and I've been using that on a free trial. Oh, it's so good. It's gonna be really hard for me to go back away from that, because all of the sound, it just sounds, and I'm not an audiophile at all, but I want to be able to hear stuff. And from a music perspective, at least, streaming is just, it's so good. But I worry about price increases and stuff. I don't know. It's a hard question. Nick, go ahead.
So, talking about music, I'm very similar. Well, I was very similar to you, I guess. I've got about 400 gigs of FLAC files, which I generally listen through Plexamp, because I think it's the best app experience on my phone. But I remember you talking about this loudness problem in one of your videos a while back, a couple weeks ago, and it's just a problem because there's something called the loudness war in music, and basically in the 90s they were mastering it at slightly lower volumes than they were in the early 2000s, where they were trying to crank up some of the frequencies and things to it was called the loudness war, and that's why a lot of your music just has different volumes, and the normalization in Plex still can't deal with it very well because they're just very different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a see. The weird thing is, I don't have the same problem with like video content, right? Like, because I have content in terms of TV shows and movies from all sorts of different places. Some of it's ripped from DVDs, some of it's downloaded digitally, um, and it's all different qualities. Like some of it's like I have some DVDs that are ripped in 480. I think it's like it's 4:3. It's really old stuff, right? And that doesn't bother me nearly as much because I go into it prepared that content's not going to be quite as good. But when I'm listening to music and I have it on shuffle and it goes back and forth between different qualities, it's really really jarring to for whatever reason my entire collection of Five Finger Death Punch is really soft. I don't know why. Like it doesn't make any sense to me because it's one of the ones that I had actually, I think I got it on Amazon. And it's not that, that's a big deal. It's just that when I'm coming from Breaking Benjamin and it's, nice and loud, sounds good. And it goes into a Five Finger Death Punch song and it's really, really soft. It's jarring. So I have to turn the volume up and then I have to turn the volume down when the next artist comes on. It's not a cohesive and pleasant experience like I'd hoped it would be. And the thing is, like, I really want to host and stream my own music because I don't want to have to pay for it. Like it's not that $11 a month is obnoxiously expensive. I think $11 a month is a really good buy for being able to have access to millions of songs. I think that's a good deal. But as has happened with streaming TV, those prices are going to keep creeping up, and eventually it's going to be like $20 a month or $25 a month, and I don't want to get to that point. I want to be able to rely on my own, but until I can fix the music collection thing, it's going to be an issue. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, when you mentioned movies, for example, I'm in the same boat as you. I might have a lot of terabytes worth of movies and TV shows, but most of them are either DVD quality, because when I first got into NCIS and 24, for example, I had the 24 was Kiefer Sutherland. I had the DVD collection. I bought the DVD collection from Virgin back in the day when we had Virgin. Now they closed up in Lebanon, but I bought it legit as DVD, and then they remastered it in Blu-ray. I wasn't going to pay for it twice, so I downloaded it digitally, and now I store it in digitally as 1080p. Some movies are in 4K, other movies are in SD because I can't find them or they don't exist in HD. So it's an eclectic quality selection of quality. But when it comes to music, same thing, because as Nick said, there was the loudness war, and you said you'll be listening to one song at one volume, and the next song comes along, it's 10 times louder because of the loudness war. And that there is no solution to that because each studio masters their audio differently. There's no standard for either movies or music. That's unfortunate, but for movies we can deal with it because there's AI upscaling and whatever with Plex and stuff. But with audio, not possible. You'll have to really work on an equalizer and spend months and months and months working on such a huge collection to make it all sound at the same volume.
Riggs, go ahead.
Yeah, with music, I like audio quality doesn't matter to me. I'm deaf in one ear and the other one's not great. So like I can't tell the difference with quality. But like that jump of loudness is something I've noticed. Like if I was going to do it, that is something I'd need to find some kind of solution for that loudness. But like I said, I do have plans to set up some kind of home lab stuff eventually. It's just I don't even know where to begin with what I'd be buying because I'd want to do it all physical rather than going cloud. I know the cloud option isn't even that expensive, but it's just it'd just be a fun project more than anything. But I don't even know where to begin with it. There's just so much I'd have to set up.
Yeah. See, the thing about the loudness thing is that both Plex and Jellyfin have the ability to fix it. So Plex has loudness normalization. You can turn that on. It don't work. If you're running the Docker version of Jellyfin, that also has a audio normalization like cron job that will go through your collection. I couldn't get to run, so I don't know if that works or not. Drew, welcome, bud. Go ahead.
So I did not want to miss out on the opportunity to chime in on the previous topic, which apparently has gone by the wayside, and didn't know if anyone used the obligatory, if I had to use OpenSUSE, that would chase me back to Windows.
They did, but I banned them for life and then murdered them.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, then I guess that's my last thing on that subject. No, but to your point about Tidal, I just wanted to chime in really quickly about that, and probably then I gotta get out. I'm on generator power right now. So if you have the ability to kind of run a Tidal against, let's just say, Spotify, and really listen to like apples to apples, like listen to the same song in both, I think that you'll actually hear a difference because of the lossless audio quality of Tidal, which and make sure that you're listening to something that actually like you can hear like differences. I tend to use something very jazz related, so I can hear individual notes with like a 4-piece jazz ensemble or something like that. It's really, really interesting when you actually listen to one against the other, apples to apples, and very, very good, by the way. I mean, I don't know if you're finding the same thing, Matt, that when you actually do the apples to apples comparison, you actually hear the difference.
As you remember, I'm coming from using Plex for the last few months, so
Right. Yeah.
the difference is like night and day. Like it's not even close.
Yeah.
So it's been quite a while since I used Spotify, but from comparing it to Apple Music, which I used for a couple months,
Okay.
it is better and it's more consistent. So like Apple Music has hi-fi stuff. Like it does a good job of some hi-fi stuff, but they also spruce in some spatial audio nonsense, which is really weird. So if you turn your head, it's only coming through one ear, so that kind of messes with everything. It's really spacey. So it was harder to compare to Apple Music because they do all those weird things.
Yeah.
And there's some that were just like some country music from the 90s, which hasn't been remastered at all. That just sounds like it came from the 90s, and they did nothing to that. Like I mean, I don't know if it's just because that's the way the producers uploaded it or what. It's just like, and the thing is like when you have those differences, it is really noticeable. So the thing I've noticed on Tidal, it isn't that it's necessarily, it does sound really good, but it's also consistent across everything. Like like every song you listen to sounds good, and that's
Yeah.
great. I love it. And the app,
Actually, I like the interface too. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've like, for example, let's just say you're looking for a specific track for a specific artist. If you're in Spotify, I just use them as the example because that's where I'm coming from. You look at like, you click on an artist and you look at like popular tracks off of that artist. They might give you 5, whereas Tidal will give you a list of popular tracks. And sometimes there's duplicates and stuff like that, especially if you're talking about jazz. But it's interesting to see. I mean, it's like, okay, well, that's one of the reasons why I was able to sell it to my family members. It's like, oh, wow, I like this part of the interface much better than I did the Spotify. I will say also, if you're using, like I'm using Apple TV, and I have a decent stereo setup to my television. the television application for Apple, for iOS or whatever, Apple TV 4K, is not very good. So if you are using it on a television like Apple TV, not as good as like Spotify rather. But I'm willing to overlook that because I don't use it that often, and it's fair. But they actually show a lot of videos in their interface for the television app, which I don't really care about. I just don't.
If you
Anyway, peace.
All right, Drew.
For all. All right, later.
Glad you could join us, man. All right, so I think that this is where I'm with music right now, is that the Tidal stuff has pulled me in, and because of the poor quality of my collection right now, that I have a hard time going away from streaming. But I have such a want for doing it that I think I'm going to put in the work. And I'm at two different points right now. I don't know whether or not I should go and fix what I have, which would, as Steve said, would take ages, or if I should just say screw it, do like a mass delete of everything I have, and actually just go buy the lossless audio from someplace without DRM, right? And now that would obviously cost a ton of money. So I'm not, I'm a little weary of that one too. So I don't know which way I'm going to go yet, but I want to host my own stuff. And I've tried, I think Josh linked me to a FFmpeg script that will basically automate going through and leveling everything for me. It looked a little complicated, to be honest with you. So I haven't tried it yet. So maybe that's an option. I don't know. Nick, go ahead.
What format do you have all your music in? Is it mostly FLAC, mostly MP3s?
I'd say it's probably mostly MP3, but you got to remember I've been collecting it for 30 years, and it's in a variety of different things. So like when you say it's like an MP3, that can mean a lot of different things, right? It can be
different bit rates in MP 128, 256,
right. And
and
a lot of
the
this
AAC. Yes.
A lot of the stuff from the early 2000s is in really poor quality because all that stuff, and I know I'm probably getting demonetized, but all that stuff came from LimeWire. Back then, like that was before iTunes became a thing, right? And iTunes came out in 2001, and when it did come out and you could buy tracks from iTunes, all of that stuff had DRM on it, like all of it. So it was, if you wanted to listen to it, you could listen to it in iTunes or you could put it on an iPod. And I was a college student, or I was in high school and then college, and I didn't want to do any of that stuff. So I wanted to have it, like I wanted to own it. And the thing about LimeWire was that, it's basically like pirating stuff today. It's, very hit or miss in terms of the quality stuff. So you got to be very careful. And I still have a lot of stuff. So a lot of stuff from the early 2000s through like 2008 or so like that is exactly like that. And it's hard to, I could get rid of all that stuff and get it legitimately and get a good format, or even retorrent it or whatever. But it's gonna take time and stuff. So I don't know. I have very little FLAC, to be honest with you. Now that I think about it, most of the FLACs that I do have are all newer. Steve, go ahead.
I was going to say that I have such an eclectic collection of music that it comes in WMA, OGG, WAVE, MP3, FLAC, and there's a format. I don't know what that format, why they called it that way, but it's called APE, APE. But I got so many file formats. But as you said, Matt, I began the mass deletion process because I wasn't gonna go through, because Music Brains, as good as it is, it also messes up, especially when you got your MP3 through LimeWire, because the ID3 tags are all over the place. It confuses Music Brains, even Music Brains, because sometimes here's the thing, Music Brains sometimes detects the correct album, but the tracks you got for the album sometimes differ on the time, because because whoever ripped that thing and made it available on LimeWire made the tracks a little bit shorter, a little bit longer. They made them into a Q bin, and the timing in the Q bin is different and whatever. I was like, Yeah, Steve, if you want to do rename them and do all the work, it's going to take you until your grandchildren have grandchildren. So I'm like, nah. I started re-downloading everything in FLAC, everything. I finished 30% of my collection so far. Most of it was game soundtracks and movie soundtracks. I began with those because this is the biggest. This is the biggest collection I have. Everything else I don't really care for except Metallica because I'm a huge Metallica fan. I actually bought there was a deal, a massive deal on the entire Metallica collection in FLAC Lossless. I bought it all for $25.99. So I don't know why they were doing the massive deal, but yeah, I'm getting everything in FLAC. I'm done with the collection I have, and I'm gonna let you in on a secret. Even if you get them legit, it doesn't mean the ID3 tags are perfect. Even if you purchase them legally, sometimes they have something in there that causes whatever tool you're hosting your music on misidentify the tracks. So
Ebooks are the same way. I mean, if you buy an ebook and it doesn't have DRM on it, if you're lucky enough to be in that situation, some of them have series info in them. Some of them don't have series info in
the
them.
timing, the major factor in misidentification when it comes to audio is the timing. Because Europe region related, because some regions have the track. This track is 3 minutes 38 seconds long. In other regions, you got the track that is 5 minutes and 23 seconds long. For whatever reason, maybe they had the full version and there's a commercial version. I don't know what the reasoning is behind that, but there's always something that that causes misidentification of tracks. Trust me on that.
Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that there is always something that causes a misidentification of tracks. That's absolutely true, because I was in a very similar position, I guess, to you two as well. About like 4 or 5 years ago, had a mix of music from Kazaa, LimeWire, and basically I was unhappy with it, so I got rid of it, joined the private tracker, and I started using a piece of software called LiDAR, which is very similar to radar, sonar. It's a fork of that, if you've ever heard of those. It automates downloading of music. Specifically, LiDAR does music, radar does movies, and sonar does TV shows. So what I use is LiDAR coupled with a very high quality private tracker, and I download as far as I can get 100% log rips of CDs. So most of my collection is CDs, and if it was never available on CD, then yeah, it will be a web FLAC download. But most of my collection is 100% CDs, and it's all cataloged and tagged sort of automatically through LiDAR. As you were saying, there are tagging issues, like, I don't know, 20-30% of the time, something like that. Yeah, that's how I do my music.
The tagging thing is weird because I just installed Jellyfin in a Docker container, and to try, because I'm a Plex user, and what I found interesting was that in Plex my tags look okay, right? Especially the artist tags, they look okay. Like all of the artists are grouped together. Using the same collection in Jellyfin, that's not the case. A lot of the artists are separated out. So like I have one called like Two Cellos, right? And for whatever reason, because of the way that it's spelled in Plex, it corrected it. In Jellyfin, it didn't. So it made me think that, well, I thought I had my tags pretty well sorted out. Apparently, I'm wrong. So it's I don't know. It's interesting. Riggs, did you still want to go? I'm sorry, I was talking.
I did, but you kind of answered it. I was I was going to say, like, all of this, like, self-hosting home lab stuff. I was going to say, would you ever do like a kind of like a beginner thing to it? Because I didn't even know where to start. And then you mentioned Jellyfin, and I was like, oh, he's got a Jellyfin video, hasn't he? I'll just watch that.
I don't have
Because
one.
I don't even know where to.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
do you
don't.
not? I thought you did.
Yeah, I don't have one yet, but I have one planned. I'm gonna do a versus video
Right. Okay.
eventually. So yeah, in the next couple of weeks
Because
there'll be one.
I know I'd want to do it physical, like physical servers, rather than like just cloud hosting it all. But I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Proxmox is going to be the best. Learn Proxmox and Docker. Those are the two things you'll learn, and then you can basically the sky's the limit because there's a ton of Docker stuff out there that you can get into. Plex and Jellyfin, and Steve does one of his. He uses what do you use, Steve? For music.
For what?
For music. Coles.
For music, Koel, Koel.
Yeah, so he has. So there's a ton of stuff out there. Sorry, I put Steve online there. There's a ton of stuff out there for this type of media streaming kind of stuff that you can look into. It's not just limited to Plex or Jellyfin. There's a ton of very specialized things just for music, just for videos. If you're going to get into the R stuff, you can get into the stuff that Nick was talking about. The problem is, like I talked about before, is that the self-hosting stuff is a rabbit hole. Once you get into it, it's going to swallow you whole and you'll never get out. Hip Dad and Cat, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Okay. Ideally, in a dream world, Rhythmbox has a replay gain where it will level your volumes as it plays. Ideally, what should be happening is somebody coding into that, where as soon as you play back, it automatically converts your volume levels on that track. So the more you listen to music, the more of your tracks get leveled to the same volume. So that's just my little input on all that.
Rhythmbox does that, or that's ideally?
Rhythmbox has a replay gain setting in their plugins. You go into there and you can set it to do it for albums or for overall leveling. But the thing is it doesn't convert the track. It just levels it as it plays.
And then it would just the track itself just stays like it normally would.
Right. But what would be ideal in a dream world would be somebody to come up with, coding within that part or within other players that can also set your replay gain to convert the tracks to the same level.
Yeah, you had my hopes up there for a minute, Hip Dad.
I love Rhythmbox, you know that.
Yeah, I know. All right, I have no clue how to say your name, so whoever starts with a T, you go next. Don't forget to mute yourself.
Just call me Toby.
Okay, that makes it easy. Go ahead.
So about all the home lab stuff, I recently got an old laptop from my dad with a nice Intel chip in it for transcoding and stuff. So I decided to set up a home lab using NixOS, and it was perfect because I didn't have to go like off the beaten path. I didn't have to do any Nix dark magic. I just turned a bunch of services on and I pasted some API keys around, and I have like a whole media server and getting the media from various sources. All that setup, it was very easy, and I just wanted to share that experience.
Home labbing stuff is really good. Like I'm very happy with my. If you're a Linux tinkerer, home labbing is like the next step. Like once you've tinkered as much as you can tinker with Linux, the next step is to get yourself a server and start doing that kind of stuff, because there's just so much stuff. And you get into learning about Proxmox, and you learn about Docker, and you learn about Podman, and then if you get really into it, you can learn into Kubernetes, and you can set up a whole bunch of Ansible scripts to set everything up for you and all this stuff. And it's just like one step after another. There's so much stuff to tinker with, and it's the tinkerer's dream. But once you start, you can't stop. It's really hard to stop, and I love it, but I found myself in some ways getting a little fatigued. So I took a break from trying new things. Like at one point I was like 4 or 5 new Docker things every day. Like it was awesome. Like I was freaking out about it. I had to slow down a little bit about that, and recently I've started integrating some new stuff again. So it was all about moderation. So it took me a while to find equilibrium and be happy with it again. But it's so much fun. I'm such a nerd. Steve, go ahead.
I was just going to add, yes, once you go into Docker, it's such a big rabbit hole. It has no end because especially if you are subscribed to the self-hosted newsletter. It's a website that curates a lot of Docker containers and stuff. Once you go there, you would want to try each and every Docker container they post about, because a lot of them we start off by thinking, oh, that's interesting, that would be useful. No, that too will be useful. That too, and it will never end. That's why I stopped. I stopped looking at that newsletter. I still receive the email and everything. I just look at it for updates. But I have my Docker containers, and I'm going to start over from scratch, because in case I am able to leave this shitty country and go somewhere where there's more power and there's not a war or anything like that, I'm going to have 24, to be able to run it 24/7, at which point I'm going to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, because I love it. I love it so much. It's I can have a Docker for everything, for music, for movies, for my comic books, for managing my picture collection, my whatever. There's so many out there, and then you want other things that manage those things, and others that manage the managers, and it's always ongoing. And that's that's one of the reasons I love Linux so much, is because we always find new things to play around with. Right now it's home lab stuff, and I will never do it the Proxmox way, because I would need to dedicate a PC for that, and it's a hell of a that. I'm going to do everything on the Raspberry Pi, because if you think about it, if it's not storage related, like movies and TV shows and stuff like that, if it's just Docker containers for your emails, for your small picture collection, for small things, Raspberry Pi is more than enough. And even if we wanted storage, we can attach hard drives to that. So you don't need to sell a kidney, for example, to have a home lab. You can do it on a Raspberry Pi, ideally on a Raspberry Pi 5, but I don't have that, so I'll use my 4. So yeah, I love this. I love this stuff. I will. And I'm gonna, and that's a little bit related to the first topic we talked about. I'm never leaving Linux, no matter what. No matter what. If it reaches a point where Linux becomes shit and it becomes unusable, it's Mac OS, because on Mac OS I can do 60% of what I can do on Linux. So having that is better than not being able to do it at all on Windows. So there you go.
Fraggle, go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, cool. For like bulk normalization and stuff like that, Audacity actually has pretty decent macro options. So you can set up macro through Audacity and just apply it to a batch of files, as opposed to just a single project. It might be something worth looking into. I mean, obviously, if you have a large music collection or anything like that, you might want to do it in small batches instead of trying to process everything all at once. But yeah, you can just apply whatever effects you want in a batch, and it'll just convert everything to whatever you want the output to be, whether that's like an end result with converting everything to MP3s or FLAC or whatever. Yeah, you can actually batch process your normalization through Audacity macros.
Well, we all know that there's a reason why Fraggle is king of the server, and that's the reason why. That's awesome. Thank you, Fraggle. I got that. I got that in a browser tab. That's going to be something that I'm going to be messing around with. Don't be prepared for no videos for the next 10 days. That's what I'm going to be doing. Nick Space, go ahead.
Does anyone host their own photos as well? Because I'm using Image to store all my photo backups and view them. I don't know if anyone else is
Yeah, I
hosting
did.
that stuff
I
themselves.
did for a while, but they were purchased by a company, and their company did something weird. So it's still free to use, but it's called a what they call it? They called it a forever trial or something like that. A permanent trial or something like that. And trial for me means that eventually it's going to go away. And that worried me a little bit. So I stopped using Image completely, even though I really like the software. Now I just use Nextcloud to host all of my images. It's just easier to do.
Yeah, next. I was using Nextcloud as well. Before I switched it. I use both concurrently. They because why not?
Yeah, I was the same. I use both. Like I said, that unlimited free trial thing really worried me. And it wasn't that I like with that kind of stuff, like I don't mind paying. Like it wouldn't have bothered me to pay, but the subscription prices that they were going to end up charging was really pricey. Like something like I think it was like 19.99 a month or something like that.
It's like a $99 license for 4 or 4 users or something like that, or you can pay $25 for 1 user. But yeah, they came out and called it a license, and like everybody didn't like that, so they just changed the wording of it to not a license. But I don't know, something like you said. I can't remember what, but it is a volunteer payment sort of. They're asking you to pay for it, but you don't have to.
Yeah, and I understand, and for now that'd be fine, but it's really weird for me to have gotten hung up on that word trial, but I did, and once I saw it, I was like I couldn't get it out of my head. Like I just can't. I don't want to invest time and effort into maintaining something and build a library there and deal with all their AI stuff and get all the stuff set up the way I want it to work, and then eventually have that rug pulled out from underneath me, right? And that worried me a bit. So I decided, I'm not going to put any effort into it. I don't even have it on my home lab anymore. I completely deleted it. I'm just going to use Nextcloud, and Nextcloud's fine for what I want to do. I don't need any of the face recognition stuff that Image has. I don't really need it. I just didn't want to. Really, what I'm using this for is a backup. So Nextcloud works perfect for me. There's another one called.
Photo Prism.
Yeah,
I've
that's it.
tried it.
Yeah, it's not as pretty for one thing. Like they did not do as good a job on the UI as Image did. But I haven't tried it beyond just installing it. So maybe that's an option.
Well, going back to AI, I thought I didn't use any AI stuff, but I guess I do with the photo recognition, face recognition in my photos. I completely forgot about it. I'm using NVIDIA tensor things inside of Image to do all that, and you know what? I like it. It's great. Works for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really need it, but I think that if it would take and actually organize the photos in their actual folders for me, that'd be cool instead of just being putting them in the web interface organized.
Yeah, it's their own weird database format thing, but that's how they get it to load a lot faster in the web.
Because it'd be really cool to have that thing kind of run through your photos and actually organize them into directories where they need to go based on who's in the photo. That'd be cool. We went through and talked about AI earlier, and then we talked about the music leveling stuff and the tags, and now we're talking about photos. This is where AI has the potential to be good, right? If AI could fix some of these problems, like I'm not a developer, so the coding help stuff doesn't really bother, help me or hurt me at all that much. I'm not a student, so I don't need to write my term papers for me. But being able to solve things like fixing my music tags, that'd be cool. Listen to this music, tell me what it is, and then write the appropriate tags for me. That'd be freaking cool. The image stuff. Tell me who's in this photo, and store all the people who match this in the proper directory. That'd be cool. Same thing for like TVs and movies and stuff like that. Organize this, make sure it has the right metadata. Ebooks, same thing. I think that if that existed, I'd be much more interested in AI, because that's a tool that's actually would be helpful for me. Now, I mean, I'm sure it has uses for other people that's much more helpful, but I don't see those things. For me, this kind of thing would be helpful. Things like being able to organize, the stuff that's on my hard drives, to keep track of everything that I download. That'd be cool. It's just, not there yet. Hip Dad, go ahead.
Had to unmute myself. Well, what you're describing is the real reason for AI. The real reason for AI is to perfect our laziness. We don't want to put in the work anymore, and we want something else to do it for us for everything. We want it to feed us. We want it to make our food. We want it to tell us how to write program. I mean, we want it to write the programs that we normally write. We want it to do everything because we want it to perfect our laziness. And that's the real reason for AI. It's not about improving society. It's about making it so we have maximum output for no effort. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Hip Dad, for making me feel like a lazy person. Steve, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm having dinner. Sorry. What I wanted to say was that the image has a feature where it can generate directories, but it's a separate thing you have to add to Docker Compose. I use that. I throw images, and there's an AI in it. You have to configure it that if it detects certain locations, it creates folders based on the location and stuff like that. But I disable all that. I just use the feature where if I put images in a certain folder that I call birthday, for example, it will automatically create an album based on that folder called birthday. I don't have to manually select the pictures in that folder and add them to album and manually create the album. Image is amazing. I have over 300 gigs of images, and the way I have it set up is as soon as I take a picture on my phone, it automatically goes to my image instance on my home lab. I have 0 images on my phone. I deleted all my images from Google Drive, iCloud, and all that nonsense. As soon as I take the picture, the original is sent. All I'm left with on the phone is the thumbnail. This is inconvenient for one reason, especially for people who do not expose their image instance to the internet. If it synchronizes to your home lab and you turn off that computer like we have to in Lebanon to save on power on electricity, the only image you can show your friends on your phone or tablet when you're outside the house is the thumbnail. It's going to be so crappy, they're going to think that you took a bad picture. It's a small price to pay to save storage on devices, and especially when the only way to back them up on iPhone and stuff is either Google or iCloud or whatever, and I don't want any of that there. So, but if you expose it to the internet the way I have, using Nginx and all that, I have access to all my pictures without having direct access to the home lab. So image is amazing. AI is good. The images features where face detection and no face detection, I disable all that because face detection, AI face detection, most of the time does things wrong. It tells me the cat is a dog and tells me my sister is a dog, and sometimes things like that happen. I don't want that to happen. I am the only one in control. That's how I prefer it. And like Hip Dad said, if we start relying too much on AI, we'll end up relying for it to do our dishes, to do our laundry, and to feed us, and to wipe our behind, so on and so forth. Don't want that to happen. We're human. We're weak.
Nick, go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to say. Something related to image that Steve was talking about, but to be honest, it's gone now. Sorry.
That's okay. So, just to kind of return to the topic of hosting your own media, I think that one of the things, if we were to ask the question, why doesn't this type of thing become more mainstream? One of the answers I think everybody would give is that it's not easy to do. You have to have the media first off, so that's an expensive endeavor unless you're going to go the R route. Also, you have to have some kind of hardware or the ability to set up a server somewhere, whether it's locally or in the cloud. Add on top of that, you have to learn the technology to actually do that. So you have to learn how, like, at the minimum, you'd have to learn how to set up something like Plex or Jellyfin or whatever. And it's not that it's hard, it's just something else to learn. So you have that situation going on, and then add on top of that, you have to know how to maintain it, how to get it to be secure. So if you're going to talk like Steve had, exposing your image server to the internet, you have to know how to do that in a way that's not going to mean that you have an open highway into your network, right? You have to learn Nginx and maybe Tailscale or something like that, and all of these things are a step that you have to learn, and that's not something that's very easy to prompt people to do when you can just pay Spotify $10 or $12 a month and they'll give you all the music you could ever want. Or you can subscribe to Netflix or HBO Max or whatever for, 20 bucks a month and get all the music or movies that you want, right? So it's a hard proposition for people when there's all this work that has to be gone into it, and all the money that you would have to set up front in order to get it to actually work, because setting up a server or whatever. Plus it doesn't help that if you say you get on YouTube and you search for home lab or self-hosting or whatever, you get presented with channels like Techno Tim and Raid Owl and stuff like that, and these guys have spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on their home lab setups. And you see that, like, if that's what you need in order to actually have a home lab to self-host your stuff, I'm screwed. I'm out. I can't afford that, right? So it's not always an easy proposition. Riggs, go ahead.
Yeah, just when you said it's like got to be like quite pricey as well, unless you go the R route. Even then, it'd be pricey, wouldn't it? Because like personally, I wouldn't want to go, hey, cloud hosting company, here's a bunch of my definitely not illegally obtained files. Like, I don't know if that'd be me being paranoid or not, but I wouldn't want to give them the evidence. Like, so even doing it that way, you'd be looking at expensive stuff because you'd have to set it up like in house, like set up your own server or something. That's definitely not the reason that I want to set up my own server. By the way, for just putting a disclaimer out there. Wink, wink.
We're this lug is getting demonetized whether we like it or not. So I've just bypassed even mentioning it. Nick, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if you really, but what Riggs was saying, you can just use like an rclone encrypted container on a cloud service. Like I've got 2 terabytes in the cloud with an encrypted container that stores things for viewing from the cloud.
I just don't know what the options are. I'm just going off assumptions. I've not looked too much into it yet, to be honest. But
you're right. Well, either way, cloud or home self-hosting like media at home, it's expensive either way because you have to buy the hard drives, which they have gotten cheaper. It's still not cheap. So it's, yeah.
Steve, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that that's not the only reason we don't use the cloud. There are other reasons. So one of them being like we don't have a fast enough internet connection to upload. Like my connection is a quarter of a meg upstream, a quarter of a meg upstream. Think about it. Like every time I want to upload Zero Linux, the ISO, it takes me 3 to 4 hours to upload it. So if not more, on my LTE connection, because my LTE connection is a little bit faster. It gives me 2 megabits upload, but so we cannot, even if we wanted to take the legit route and use the cloud services and whatnot, we can't because we don't have any ISP in the entire country that provides anything more than a quarter of a meg upload. So there are legit reasons also that won't allow us to do that. But self-hosting is way more secure to me, and this is my opinion only, it's more secure because we have full control over everything that's being done and hosted and everything. There is a risk, yes, because the cheapest storage nowadays is spinning rust. And why do we call it spinning rust? Because there's something called data rot, and if you don't turn on your computer and access it continuously, like often, they will rust. I just lost 3 hard drives because I hadn't turned on my HTPC before we started turning it on now for 4 years. And if a hard drive doesn't spin up every month or two to get it up and running, it's gonna rot. It's gonna die. So there's a risk, but it's better to host things yourself than to give it to third parties. You never know when they're going to find things out, or stuff like that. It's better to do everything on your home lab, and I'm going to continue doing the home lab stuff. It's never going to stop.
Yeah, so I think my home lab's gonna get bigger. So I'm with you, Steve. I have plans.
Yes, Matt. Bigger.
Yeah, bigger. So I was very opposed that when I first started this to having an actual server in my house, because all I hear is loud airplane sounding fans, right? I don't want that anywhere in my house. I don't have Ethernet ran throughout my house, so whatever home lab is going to be in this room where I record videos, and also there's a bed over there where I sleep. So I don't want to have an entire server rack in this room. And I'm not going to. Maybe someday I'll be able to run Ethernet cable to another room in the house or into a closet or whatever. That's possible. And then I'll revisit the whole server thing. But I've come to think that what I want to do is I have a HP workstation that I use as a home lab now. It has a Xeon processor and 128 gigabytes of RAM, and it works really well. I don't really need anything more than that because I use Proxmox. But on eBay, which is a site I should definitely avoid going to if I want to stop spending money on this, there are little ThinkStation things from Lenovo that have like a Core i5 or whatever in them. You can put your own as much RAM in it as you want. You can use NVMe's and stuff. And you can buy them in lots of 5 for like $250. You get 5 of them for some of them are even cheaper than that. And someone 3D printed little server brackets that you can put on these little mini PCs and put them in a mini server rack. And that just sounds like something cool that I want to do. So I don't know what I'm going to use it for yet because I don't really need it. But I have those things on my eBay page just sitting there staring me in the face like, you kind of want to do this. And I don't know. I'll find a reason to do it eventually because I don't think I'm gonna be able to resist it. But it's just it's awesome. Anyways, so I think that anybody else have anything else to say on the self-hosting stuff for the topic earlier that we wanted to say, or everybody said their piece? Going once, going twice. All right. I think that's where we'll end it. We're just coming up on, and we're a little bit less than 2 hours this time because Matt was late. Sorry about that. But anyway, I think we'll go ahead and stop it here. For those of you who watched live, thank you so very much for watching. We really do appreciate it. If you want to join us on a lug, we do this twice a month. We do an early one like this one. We start at 11:15 Eastern time. Or thereabouts, and we do that on the second Thursday of every month. So join us. It's going to be awesome. If you can't make that one, we do a second one. It's an evening one. It's the fourth Thursday of every month. That's at 8:15 p.m. Eastern time. And we do topics. So if you want to vote on the topic, you have to join the Discord server to find that poll. I usually put it out about a week ahead of time. And as is usual, usually the topic that's like the least good wins. So it happens, but 2 times in a row, maybe I'll have to stop putting bad topics on the poll. Maybe that's what I need to do. Anyways, if you want to watch us live, I always stream the lug as well, so you can just watch along, or you can join the room and just stay silent. A lot of people here did that today. That's fine. It makes you participate without actually having to participate, which is great. We love having people show up. It just makes it so it's just not me sitting around in a room all by myself. That'd be pretty lame. Anyways, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for joining Lug. Thanks everybody for your conversations. It was wonderful as always. We'll see you all next time.
Later.